You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today, he muses.
Neither a leader nor a legend.
Bob Kravitz. I've been trying to get Bob on the podcast for a while. He's had a tumultuous year or so.
It's been interesting, yes.
So we haven't been able to make it happen, but finally we are. And one of the things that I want to do multiple times during this podcast, because it's such great writing, is promote his Substack. Mm-hmm. Is that called an account?
Yeah, it's a Substack, account, I guess.
A platform.
I don't know what the hell it is. I just write them and hope somebody reads them.
Musings of an Old Sports Writer. It's on Substack. Bob is an award-winning columnist who has worked for Sports Illustrated, who covered your exit from the Athletic rather generously, as I saw.
Yeah.
The Rocky Mountain News, and we're going to ask about his championship years in Denver. Of course, the Indianapolis Star and other publications. He's covered sports as a columnist and feature writer for more than 40 years. He was also a graduate of Indiana University, 1982, so he was there for
1981.
And he worked at the Daily Student. So we're going to talk about Bob Kravitz, Bob Knight, and nudity.
Those are three words you don't want in the same sentence.
Today's podcast features Bob without boundaries.
Yeah.
Which means it should work wonderfully. Thank you, Bob, for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. I'm glad we were able to finally make it work.
You've always been very generous. It's interesting that I only really worked with you on one story, and that was the story I leaked to you about the $160 million deal with the CIB and Pacer Sports Entertainment in 2014. And it was funny, too, because the only two people who were upset with me about that, Tim Swearens and, God rest his soul, Matt Tully.
Matt Tully, yeah.
They wanted the story, and I'm like, no, I got to give it to the guy with the 6 million Twitter followers. And
I appreciate that. It's diminished since then. No longer 6 million, more like 5.5.
You wrote very poignantly, and we're going to get to a lot of aspects of your career, but focus probably on the last few years, about your love of writing and how it was a bug that bit you early.
Yes. My father, I grew up in New York, in Long Island, and my father would take the train every day into New York City, into Manhattan, to work, and he would pick up all the New York and New Jersey papers when he got into town, and he'd bring them home, and it was like a Christmas gift. Every day, here are your papers, and I would just eat them up. I just cover to cover. Even the page 6 stuff in the New York Post. Actually, that was my favorite. But I just love reading it, and I got the journalism bug at a very young age. I remember really in high school, I used to write columns about the hockey team that I played for.
That's nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every story was Kravitz was brilliant in goal, stopping 47 shots, most of them high leverage, high pressure. Oh, yeah.
The Long Island Gump Worsley.
I was, for a while in college, my friends called me Gump. That was great.
You don't get many Gump Worsley references.
You don't, but I'm glad we got one in this podcast.
You grew up you were born, I'm guessing, in the early 60s, if my math is correct.
Yeah, I was born in 60.
And so growing up in New York in, let's say, late 60s, early to mid 70s, not a bad time to be a sports fan.
No, I really came of age. 69 was the Miracle Mets. Mm-hmm. The Knicks won the championship. My beloved Islanders had not been formed as of yet. And I wasn't a Jets fan, but the Jets won the Super Bowl in 69? Yeah, 69 was the year where it all came together.
And the Knicks won in 70 and 73.
73.
Yeah.
73, yeah.
What about Mickey Mantle, Bill Bradley?
Bill Bradley was my time, but Mickey Mantle was a little bit before my time. I would have been a little kid during Mantle's salad years.
What about, who did you read?
Dick Young, who I found out later was a churl. But I read Mike Lupica. I read Jimmy Breslin, who was a city side columnist, the best who ever lived. People like that. John Johnstone from Newsday, covered the Islanders.
Let me ask you about another, and then we'll move on. Another great sports figure, sports widely defined, who was in New York at that time, and that is Bobby Fischer. The chess grandmaster.
Oh, the chess grandmaster, yes.
Who was
nuts.
Turned out not to like the Jewish folks too much.
He was a self-hating Jew, apparently.
Yeah, but the son of two brilliant parents who became, if not the best chess player of all time, certainly the greatest.
I remember the Spassky, was it 72?
72, that's what I was asking
72, you. 72, Spassky. I remember, because I didn't play chess. I don't know the first thing about chess. But I do remember following that in the newspapers when it was going on.
Because he hid out in
Reykjavik,
Douglas, but before then he was hiding out in Douglaston, Queens.
Yes.
And he went to high school, and Barbara Streisand, and Neil Diamond were all in high school at the same time. Same high school. But back then, New York, is it fair to say New York was still the center of the American sports world, even more than Los Angeles?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. New York, the fandom, you got two baseball teams, three hockey teams. When I was growing up, we only had the Rangers. But New York, I think it's still to some degree the epicenter, although their teams generally stink.
Did you root for the Giants to beat the Patriots in both Super Bowls?
At that point, I had given up my fan card. My wife does not understand this. She's like, how can you watch a game and not say anything? How could you not root?
I was thinking more rooting against the Patriots than for the Giants.
Oh, yeah, I didn't like the Patriots and what they stood for besides winning. But, yeah, I enjoyed watching the Giants beat their ass, but I don't root when I watch games now. We watched the national title game last night, and I was rooting for Michael Penix and Washington because he went to IU and all that, and I know the kid a little bit and his family. But no, I don't find myself rooting very much.
That actually leads me right into my next question. If you don't root for teams, which obviously I get, do you find yourself rooting for players or cities? You want Indianapolis to really do well when it hosts the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah. You root for cities. I always found myself, I lived in Cleveland for a while, and I all my friends were Browns crazies. So I always found myself rooting for Cleveland to finally do something with football. But I root for the story. I root for whatever the most compelling story may be. And I root for nobody to get seriously hurt. I remember going having a beer with Robert Mathis once, and he couldn't understand me saying that I wasn't a Colts fan. I'm like, I'm a nothing fan. I'm like a political writer, objective.
But in a sense, you're not objective as a columnist, so you would have more, am I fair to say, you'd have more latitude to root?
Not so much. I think as a local columnist, you're focused on that team, but you're not rooting for them. Honestly, was I happy they won the Super Bowl in 2009? No, six.
Seven.
Six,
Mm-hmm.
7. 9 was New Orleans, Hank Basket off the face.
I was actually there. I was working for Mayor Ballard, and I remember he called me, and as all my friends and listeners of the podcast know, I've been a fervent Miami Dolphins fan since Super Bowl VI. So that's the 71 season. I was born in 67. I remember the game because my dad was watching it. And Mayor Ballard goes at the end of the third quarter, if the Colts win, get down to where I'm sitting. He had slightly better seats than I did.
Imagine that.
We're flying home on the Colts plane. And I've never rooted for any team to win as much as I did. I'm like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And, of course, I black-catted them.
Yeah, that's a shame.
But when you root, you want the Pacers to do well. Not only that, it gives you more to write about. The further you go in the playoffs, the better it is for me.
Oh, it's the fact that the Colts had a decent season this year undoubtedly helped my subscription on bobkravitz.com, free plug. If they had gone 4-13 again, I don't think I would have had the incredible start that I had on the platform. So yeah, you root for yourself, you root for the story, you root if you're on Deadline, which I'm not anymore. But if you're on Deadline, you root for blowouts. You're like, please let this game. Like Peyton Manning damn near killed me with the comeback in Tampa.
When they were down 3 or 4 touchdowns.
They were down 3 touchdowns with 5 minutes to go, and the SOB leads them back. And
did you tell him that?
I did. I said, "You caused my heart attack."
I'm assuming he didn't apologize.
No, he's like that.
Let me ask another question. Do you root against? You have an opinion about Coach Bill Belichick. He is on the precipice, even though he's had a terrible year, of breaking Don Shula's all-time NFL win record, which I think is 347. Does Bob Kravitz want Bill Belichick to have that record over Don Shula, who's probably the most honest person in professional sport?
Yeah, not really. Look, Belichick to me is the greatest NFL coach who's ever lived.
Despite
it, yeah, because he did it all in the salary cap era. Was coaching when Walsh was coaching in San Francisco. They didn't have to worry about salary cap. They could pay the most money,
Even
I just realized I don't have my headphones on.
Oh, that's all right. We can hear you just fine.
All right. But
despite the fact that
Deflategate, all the other stuff. Videogate. It's like Jim Harbaugh winning the national title last night. You have mixed feelings about it. But the only reason I would ever root against, after Deflategate, I got so much crap from people in New England that I hoped that they would lose because the idea of New England fans being upset really gave me a thrill.
And the Patriots were a non-entity for their first
for the longest
35, 40 years. They made it to a couple of Super Bowls and got waxed in both of them.
Whacked, yeah. I remember the old erector set of a stadium they played in the Schaefer Stadium, something like that. Boy, what a dump that was. And I was there. I was in that stadium when Tom Brady made his first start. Because if you remember, that was against the New England Colts. That was against the Indianapolis Colts. That was his first start.
Let's ask. He's already been on the podcast twice, but I need to ask Eddie White what he thinks about Bill Belichick breaking
He loves him.
Don Shula's record.
Oh, yeah. He loves him even more. He loves him some Don Shula.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Bob Kravitz, well-known and award-winning sports columnist. We're discussing his career and also his latest endeavor, Musings of an Old Sports Writer, which is on Substack. And bobkravitz.com.
Correct.
You went to IU.
I did.
How did you choose IU from Long Island, New York?
Yeah, I grew up on Long Island. When I was 16, we moved to Chicago, my junior year of high school. That was easy. But we moved, and when I was looking for colleges, I wanted two things. I wanted a great journalism school with good sports, Division I sports to cover, and I wanted a hockey team that I could play for. I played in high school. We won a state championship in Chicago, which was pretty cool. And Indiana fit the bill. They had a club team, not a big time.
Right. Michigan,
Minnesota,
Boston
Ohio
University
State.
College.
I wasn't that good. I was the king of mediocrity. But I got to play at IU, and I worked at the Indiana Daily Student. And so that's how I ended up there. I didn't want to go back east, and I wasn't smart enough to get into Northwestern, which was near where I live. Indiana it was.
You were there for both the Corso years and the Knight years.
Mm-hmm.
Corso is obviously a hell of a lot more famous now than he was coaching IU. Also, was Doc Councilman there?
Yeah.
Still? And
Kobe Billingsley?
Yagi?
Jerry Yeagley.
Yeagley, yeah. IU had a significant, not really football, obviously, but
Sam Bell and
track, that's right.
He was an Olympic coach. So, yeah, they had a lot of luminaries. And I'll tell you about Corso. I wrote something one day that he didn't like, and
At the Daily Student?
At the Daily Student. And he very gently chided me and told me what he thought I should have done and how I should have handled it, and damn if he wasn't right in retrospect. And he was a journalism major himself at Florida State.
Oh, I knew he went to Florida State. I didn't know he was a journalism major.
Journalism or communications, I forget. But as opposed to Bob Knight, who's a whole different kettle of fish.
History major, as I recall, at Ohio State.
Yes.
Well, I read the story about you and another reporter being subjected to Bob Knight in a state of nature. Did you? It seems that every reporter I've interviewed for the podcast has had a Bob Knight moment.
Oh, yeah.
Where their relationship with him, and I guess subsequently the team or the program, makes a turn. Did you have one of those moments?
Oh, yes. I started out, Knight liked me. Knight thought I was a smart ass and fairly tough-minded. I walked in there and didn't let his nakedness throw me off at our first interview.
Plus, he's a big man.
He's a big dude. He's a big dude. He's 6'5", and I'm not. And I wrote a story, and I felt like it needed Knight's comment. And I told Knight what I was working on, and he went bananas. Veins popping out of his forehead and his neck, and yelling at me and spit flying everywhere.
And this is peak Bob Knight, late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, this is...
So they won the NIT that year, beating Purdue.
They won the NIT.
And then he was coach of the Pan Am Games that same year. What were you writing about, if I may ask?
I wrote about, they had 3 players who'd been kicked off the team for allegedly smoking weed at the Alaska shootout. And I got in touch with 2 of the 3. It was like 1 year later, whatever happened to these guys. And one guy was still critical of Knight. One guy was like, oh, Knight set me on the path of righteousness. And the third guy I can get a hold of. And the point of the story was that they went on and had a pretty good season. They won the NIT, if I remember correctly.
Back when the NIT was a relatively
kind of
big deal.
Thing. Yeah, they beat Purdue. Yeah. I told him what I was working on, and he's like, do you think these kids want to read about those ads? Blah, blah, blah. So the next game was down at Rupp Arena against Kentucky, and I noticed we were having pregame dinner in the press area, and all the managers were looking at me. All the IU managers were looking at me and whispering and pointing. And I was like, oh, shit, something's up.
Was that when John Gruden was there as a manager? Or was that before then?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I don't know what year he was there.
I don't know either off the top of my head. So when you see these folks as a student, and then you become basically a professional sports writer, journalist, what kind of interaction did you have with them?
Well, you mean with the...
Like Corso with Knight and the people that you saw when you were an 18-year-old kid and now you're 30 years old and you have your own byline. And
yeah. Obviously, it's changed. Corso would help me. Knight treated me the way he treated Russ Brown from the Louisville Courier-Journal and all the other guys that he hated. So I was telling you that the managers and stuff were pointing at me. And so after the game, I go to the locker to go in and talk to Isaiah and Ray Tolbert and all those guys. You're not coming in. You're done for the season. I was not allowed in the locker room for the rest of the year. And when I would ask Knight a question at a press conference, which was every press conference, he'd just look over my head and go, next question. Who else has a question?
And the Daily Student or the School of Journalism or anyone just didn't have the power to walk in and say, you can't.
It's Bob Knight. It's Bob Knight versus an 18-year-old. And I wasn't going to win that fight.
Did you win it later?
I wasn't trying to win.
But you got to write about Knight's firing.
Yeah. I mean, I did say he brought it on himself. There was always a weird cult-like thing at Indiana with Knight. I didn't like what he stood for in a lot of ways. I remember when he said, if rape is inevitable, sit back and enjoy it, or something along
Relax and enjoy it.
Relax and enjoy it. I remember writing something. I killed him. And I got killed by readers because it was a different time.
Sure.
Back then, it was almost okay.
He had just won the national championship for the third time.
He couldn't do anything wrong. And he demanded what he demanded from his players, he never demanded from himself.
And what is the trade-off? I do public relations for a living. As a Republican, I deal with, let's just say, the majority of people I deal with in the media aren't.
Right.
And so there's always that trade-off between stand your ground and, okay, if I stand my ground, the next time I pitch a story, is he or she going to go, whatever vein? I'm not messing with that one right now.
Always stand your ground.
The trade-off between access and stand your ground?
The nice thing about being a columnist is you don't have to have access. Does it help? Yes. It's different if you are the guy or the woman who is covering the Colts or whomever.
The beat reporter, yeah.
On a daily basis. As a beat reporter, you need to maintain that access because those players and coaches are your lifeblood for your stories. For a columnist, you can kind of say whatever the hell you want to say, and if they're pissed at you, that's just too bad.
You came through, we're talking with Bob Kravitz, who currently writes on Substack, Musings of an Old Sports Writer. Bob, you came into journalism school, not at the tail end, but 5-6 years after Watergate.
Yeah.
How did Watergate affect your sense of journalism and how it was taught to you?
Sure, that's a great question. And when I talk to kids, they ask, what are some of your formative experiences in journalism? And that's when all the presidents, man, journalism was viewed as a noble undertaking. That has changed, obviously, over the years for several reasons. But I always saw it, speak truth to power, that kind of thing, demand the best out of them. And I'm trying to think of the word. But anyway, accountability. Thank you. Thank you. It's pretty good for a Republican.
We do what we can.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a noble profession. And that's one of the things that got me jazzed about it. It was that I thought you were doing something important.
And did the fact that political reporting, Watergate, Vietnam, the Church Committee, about that Frank Church had, the senator from Idaho, did it have a magnetic effect? Hey, I want to do political stuff or government, or were you set on sports from day one?
I thought about news, and I did a few news stories for my high school paper, and I just found that I love to write, and I just found that writing about sports gave me more freedom to put myself out there as a person, put my personality into my writing. I felt that political writing, the only kind of political writing that really appealed to me was Jimmy Breslin, Mike McAlery, Mike Roy, Jack Anderson, all those guys. Those were some of my idols growing up.
When was your first, if you remember, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this moment? Because we always think of it, right? The writers, if you watch them win the national championship. Did you have a moment like that?
Maybe, it might have been a little later in my career, strangely enough. Being at the Olympics the first time in Albertville, France in 92. I was 32. I'd had those sorts of moments prior to that, but that was one of those moments where I thought, damn, I made it. I'm at the Olympics. How cool is this? And they paid me to get on a flight to France, to the Alps, French Alps. So that was cool. But I had several of those moments prior to that, but I can't specifically recall.
Forgive my ignorance. Did you cover the Dream Team in Barcelona in 92?
I covered them part-time. I was in Barcelona. I covered the whole Olympics. So I was covering this, that, and the other thing. But I did several games, and we all hung out with Charles Barkley one night and had way too many cocktails on Las Ramblas, which is the main drag in Barcelona. So yeah, I did cover quite a bit of that.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmond Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our guest today is award-winning sports columnist Bob Kravitz. If you had a podcast and could have anyone in the world as your first guest, who would you choose?
Does he have to be alive?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
If you want him, he or she to speak.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to say Jackie Robinson, but that would be my dream.
His face should be carved on a mountain somewhere.
It should be. Let me think. Tiger Woods would be really interesting.
You think he'd answer all your questions?
That's been established already. Just the unique way in which he grew up, and I think, Tiger would be one. And I'm a golfer. I don't watch golf that much, but I love to play. But I think he would be fascinating. Growing up as a guy who so much was expected, like LeBron, and they overshot all those expectations.
How did you end up? When did you come to the Indianapolis Star, and why did you come to the Indianapolis Star?
Interesting. 2000, I came here, so I've been here 23, 24 years. I was working at the Rocky Mountain News in Denver, and I was very happy there. It's great. It's a great town, great sports town. In fact,
their teams were
winning championships, and during the time that we were there, we got the Avalanche hockey team and the Rockies baseball team. In fact, I wrote a book about the first year of the Colorado Rockies. It's available on Amazon for about 32 cents hardcover. But we were locked in a newspaper war with the Denver Post. It was one of the last true two newspaper wars in the country. And I was getting the feeling, and it turned out to be right, that the Rocky was going to lose that war. And I didn't have any guarantee that I would be hired on by the Post if the Rocky went down. And I was a game of musical chairs. I didn't want to be caught without some place to sit. And an old friend of mine from Indiana, Tim Franklin, who I'm sure you remember, he was the publisher of the Star, and they made me a wonderful offer. And despite the fact that we don't have a hockey team or a Major League Baseball team, I said yes, and been here 24 years, and it's great. It's a great sports town, and it's a great place to raise your kids.
You get here the year after Manning? Is he 99?
No, Manning was 98. So I was here for his third season.
And the first season was terrible. The second season they made the playoffs 13 and 3.
Correct.
Is that one of the reasons? And the Pacers were really good. They had just made the NBA Finals.
Money was the reason. I mean, whether they were good or not, the fact that it was a really good sports town, and the fact that you had two major league sports teams plus college is huge here. I don't do much high school, if any, but that's also big here. But the fact that we had things to write about was very much a lure for me. Whether they were doing well or not, I mean,
it wouldn't have made a difference if the Colts were 1-15 and the Pacers were 16-66.
No,
not at all.
Not at all. Not at all. No, I mean, you cover good teams and you cover bad teams. When I was in Denver, I covered some terrible Nuggets teams that won 12 games a year. Broncos were up and down until they They got their 2 championships.
Till they
Avalanche
draft Terrell Davis.
Terrell in the 6th round, for God's sake, or 5th round, I forgot. But, and that Elway guy was pretty good.
He's pretty good.
Think about the quarterbacks I've had. I'm in Cleveland with Bernie Kosar, who was good. Not great, but really good. Then I go to Denver. I got John Elway. Then I come here and I get Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck.
We're going to talk about that. And Gardner Minshew. I'm going to read something and tell me your reaction.
Okay.
It's on your Substack. I also thought I'd retire at WTHR. Never should have left the Indianapolis Star. Never, ever.
Shouldn't have. The WTHR, I don't know why they hired me in the first place, to be honest with you, but
you're the leading sports voice in the market.
Yeah, I was. But I tell my kids this all the time, and I didn't listen to my own thoughts. I say, don't mess with happy. And I was happy at the Star. I was happy. The deadlines were starting to wear me out. I'll be honest with you. And I had some heart issues along the way that made it a little more of a challenge. But I just fell in love. Look, they offered me a ton of money. And I thought, wow, I get to do the same things I was doing at the Star, except no deadlines. And I get to do a little TV. And while I'm not real comfortable, and I certainly don't look like I belong on TV, it was still fun. There was a chance to branch out and see what I could do.
And Calabro's
terrific
guy.
Good guy. But they let me go after 4 years of a 5-year contract that wasn't guaranteed, because none of them are, I don't think. And then I found myself at the Athletic, which was a small disaster, but that's neither here nor there.
A disaster in terms of how they treated you personally, or their business model, or
how they treated me. I just felt marginalized almost from day one. I had four or five editors in 4 years. They were constantly changing what they wanted from you. And I had editors, I would tell them I want to do a story on X, and they would tell me, it's not going to do, I don't think it's really that, it's going to do that analytically. And I'm like, I'm in Indianapolis. I've been here for 23 freaking years. I know what's going to get read here. And I got tired of being overruled on what a good story was for our local market. And it was just very frustrating.
Did you ever consider becoming the editor?
Hell no. No, I'm not an editor. I'm a writer.
Never thought about?
No, look, you mean at the Athletic?
Well, I'm saying if you have the power, small p or capital P, of an editor, then you can go to bat for writers like you.
Yeah. No, I asked them when I joined, I said, do you want me to be the guy who runs the Indianapolis region? And they were like, no, we just want you to be a columnist. And I said, okay, that's fine.
You've been very candid in your writings about you should have never left the Star. The THR thing was a bit of maybe a surprise, not a shock, but let's say surprise.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
The Athletic was not what you wanted it to be,
right,
and you left. Have you ever, as a sports journalist, called for someone to lose their job? And if so, do the last few years give you a different perspective?
I think the only coach that I could ever remember calling out was Jim O'Brien.
The Pacers coach.
The Pacers coach, because I knew how bad it was. Chris Polian. No, it doesn't. Look, these guys.
But this guy needs to be cut. We need to trade this quarterback.
No,
that's people's livelihoods. Does it give you a bit of a pause before you hit enter?
No, because I'm an insensitive lout.
Is that a prereq?
It is. No, look, they are paid ungodly sums of money to. They took on this job understanding that nothing is forever, and I understand that in my job. I understand that we're judged on analytics and metrics and all that kind of stuff. So
Chartbeat, I recall, is that the name?
Chartbeat, yeah, I remember that at the WTHR. No, not really, not really. And I know it makes me sound insensitive. But I rarely call for anybody's head for that reason. There really needs to be a compelling reason why Coach X or player X just doesn't belong.
Have you ever been in the locker room and you're covering basketball and football mostly, so it's not exactly it's not Munchkin land. Have you ever felt this guy may just grab me or get in my face?
Oh, it's happened. It happened in Denver. I was down in Tucson for spring training, and I had written something about Dante Bichette. I don't know if you remember him, as a baseball player. And he had to be pulled off of me. He didn't get any shots in, but we were this close to each other, screaming at each other. And he pushed me, and I pushed him back, and then we were separated. Good thing for him, because I would have kicked his ass. Guy's about 6'3", 250.
In case you didn't hear at the beginning of the podcast, Bob Kravitz is from New York.
Oh yeah, I'm not allowed to say that, am I? I'm sorry.
No, you're perfectly fine. My parents are from New Jersey, so the mentality
Jersey. So is my wife. So.
But you never felt, there's the Jim Rome thing, obviously, with Jim Everett, and there's some other confrontations. And I always just wonder if some of these players are just like, I'm not going to let you get away with talking about me that way, and we're going to settle it as adults, and you're not going to hide behind your pen.
That's happened very infrequently. And usually I try to diffuse it and say, look, let's have a conversation as two human beings, and I may, in the end, agree with you. I had a disagreement with Jeff Saturday, and he was pissed off about something I wrote, and we talked about it, and I said, I think you're right. I'll go back, I'll look at what I wrote, and if it's off, if it's unfair, I've done plenty of mea culpas in my career. You're on a deadline, you're just trying to get something out there, something pops in your head, and then an hour later, you're like, oh crap, what the hell did I just write? And but I have not had, really, the Dante Bichette was as close as I've come to actually throwing hands.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is award-winning sports columnist, very familiar to this market, Bob Kravitz. He is now writing on Substack, and his column is called Musings of an Old Sports Writer. May I read another sentence to you?
Sure.
And you can react?
Sure.
Quote, a league source tells me, I figured you'd get it after that. A league source tells me the NFL is investigating the possibility the Patriots deflated footballs Sunday night. More to come.
Yeah.
That became the biggest story, not just sports story, but literally the biggest story in the country for several cycles.
I was on CNN with Anderson Cooper, and I almost called him Cooper too. Thank you, Anderson.
Everyone in sports has a nickname. You should just call him Coop, like Michael Cooper.
It was wild. Yeah, I got that. They played on a Sunday, and I got it Sunday night, and then I spent about an hour trying to get it confirmed. Now, I knew the person who told me I knew was right, but I had to get it confirmed by somebody who was totally in the know. And I got that, and I tweeted it out. And yes, all hell broke loose. I was dead asleep in my room. 4:00 in the morning, my phone rings. It's NBC News. Boston radio wanted me on at 6 in the morning. It was a bleep show. It really was. I won't use the word. I know.
Did you think this is a great time to renegotiate my contract?
It's funny when I was doing myself before you do when they tell you how you're doing at the end of the year. I just put, and you have to do a self-review, evaluation. Yeah, thank you. I'm having a hard time with words today. And I put, broke Deflategate, drops the mic. It didn't help me in the long run, but...
Why did that become such a big story, other than the fact that it played into the Patriots cheating?
Right. Because it was the flagship franchise of the league. And it was a team that was going back to the Super Bowl for the 800th time. And it was Tom Brady. If this had been some schmuck with the Atlanta Falcons, I don't think it would have been as big of a deal. But it did fit into the general idea with the video gate or whatever it was previously. It fit the bill for the Patriots. And they were going to the Super Bowl. They won that game and they were going to the Super Bowl. Yeah, it was a perfect story. It was a perfect storm.
Did you get everything right in that story? No regrets? No.
No, the only thing I would regret would be that, I can't remember if it was Peter King or Mortensen. I think it was Mortensen was told by a league source that like 10 out of 12 balls were 2 pounds underweight, which turned out to be a wrong statistic. And I said, according to Chris Mortensen, blah, 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 blah. So I wish I had known that somebody gave him bad information. But no, the only other thing is I wouldn't have engaged with the fans and their media as much as I did. I should have just kept my mouth shut and let the reporting speak for itself. But they were going after my wife. They were going after my kids. They were just being so nasty, claiming that I was drunk when I tweeted it out. It was just absurd stuff. And
part of the problem, forgive me, was part of the problem, let me say it a different way, was part of the interest in the story, and I'll speak for myself, I didn't know that footballs had to be inflated.
I didn't know either.
Particular PSI. I had no clue.
I did not know either. In fact, I didn't know that both teams brought their own footballs into the game for use on the offense. I had no idea. All I knew was that they were being investigated. And I got these New England fans saying it's been proven scientifically that the balls deflated because of the cold weather. I was like, look, I'm not saying whether they were deflated or not. I'm saying that they were being investigated. Okay? That's a whole different thing. Right. Now, did I believe that there was some underhanded tactics being used? Yes. They're the Patriots. But that's not what I reported. I reported they were being investigated, and that was 100% true.
You have covered several Super Bowls. I'm going to ask you 3. Of these 3, which was your favorite to cover?
Okay.
The Colts beat the Bears to win the Super Bowl. The Colts lose to the Saints.
No.
Indianapolis hosts the Super Bowl in 2012.
The hosting the Super Bowl was absolutely fantastic, except that I spent the entire week running down Peyton Manning's stories, because if you remember, that's when Peyton was coming back from his neck surgeries, and there was the question whether they were going to get rid of him in the next month or so, which I knew they were going to. You got Andrew Luck available, and you got a guy with a bad arm who you owe $28 million to. That's a no-brainer, man. I would say the win over the Bears was a favorite. Probably my favorite Super Bowl was Elway finally winning the Super Bowl.
The first one
in 98. 98, that would have been
San Diego. And the next year they beat the Falcons.
Next year they beat the Falcons when Eugene Robinson
won the Leon Lett Award.
It won it won the Bart Starr Award and gets picked up with a hooker on Biscayne Boulevard. Good Lord. I remember we were all out to dinner the night before the game, and we're like, man, we busted butt. We did a great job. Nothing can possibly happen now. And we wake up the next morning, and there's a story about
he was the captain, wasn't he?
Yeah, Eugene Robinson with a hook. Oh my gosh!
Did you enjoy doing your radio show, Kravitz and Eddie?
Yeah, I did mostly because Eddie made it enjoyable. I'm not a high energy or particularly articulate person, I don't think. And
speaking is different than writing. Obviously.
Yeah, it's totally different. Sometimes as you've noticed, I'll just forget the dang word. I enjoyed it. It was hard writing 4 or 5 columns a week and doing a radio show 5 days a week. Again, my dang health just kept getting in the way of stuff.
Quadruple or quintuple?
I had a quadruple
bypass.
Yeah,
a few years ago.
And I've had heart problems on and off for the last 15 years, but I enjoyed it. Eddie is just a bottomless pit of energy. Not pit, but he's just got lots of energy, and he's always on. And I'm not always on. I'm rarely on.
What happened to it? I don't listen to much sports radio, but I thought it was a
what
terrific
happened was
show.
the guy, I did too, and our ratings were good. The guy who ran the place suddenly passed from pancreatic cancer. I forget his name now, Italian guy. He passed, and the new people they brought in, the guy wanted JMV from the other station and didn't want to pay both me and Eddie. Wanted to pay one guy. So I think it was economic, and I think the guy just generally didn't like our show. And that's his prerogative, but I thought it was a really good show. I really did. I thought it was smart. And I thought we got incredible guests.
How do other sports writers view? We just had it a few days ago. This wasn't it. Troy Aikman was going on and on about Indianapolis. Mike Greenberg from ESPN has said in the past, Indianapolis is the premier sports city in the country as far as events. What is the opinion of Indianapolis when the sports writers come to town?
I remember guys who are not looking forward to coming to a cold weather site in whatever year that was, 2000.
For the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
2012.
And then they got here. And first, we got lucky with the weather. We got really lucky because if you remember, we were supposed to get it the year before, and Jerry Jones outbid us, and he had the new stadium coming online. And they got nailed with the worst ice storm of the century. And
we had 10 inches. I was working for Mayor Ballard, and we got 8 to 10 inches of snow when 2 inches was forecast.
Right.
And the mayor's in Dallas, and I'm here doing all the Salt Barn interviews, getting lit up because why haven't you done more yet? I'm like, I looked at your station, it said 2 inches, so that's why.
Yeah, it's your fault. Blame Sean Ash.
But you're right. Jerry Jones stole that Super Bowl from us.
Right, and you get what you deserve. The guys get here, and they're like, oh, cold weather, what's Indianapolis, how exciting. They loved it. Sports writers love to complain. I did not hear one complaint the whole dang week. All right, there were a couple of people who were stuck out in Keystone at the Crossing. Sure. So they were not really happy. But 90%, Allison Melanchthon told me, she said, if you hear any complaints, let me know because we'll get things fixed. I kept texting. I said, nothing. Everybody loves even the little touches, like the letters from kids. That's why I can't wait for the All-Star game, even though I hate the actual All-Star game because it's not basketball. I don't know what it is. But we are going to do it right. And Bob Ryan, who I'm sure you know from Boston,
who I'd love to have on the podcast.
Oh, he would do it. He'd do it in a heartbeat.
His writing is terrific.
Yeah, he's wonderful. But yeah, no, it just went so perfectly. It was just a weird week for me because I remember one day I go off to just go get a beer. I just finished my column. I just want to relax, have a beer. And I get a call from ESPN. Chris Mortensen just reported that Peyton Manning's been cleared to practice or play or whatever.
Because Manning and Mortensen are close.
They have the same agent.
Okay. That always helps.
Yeah, that helps. And so I had to run back into the media room and write another column and make phone calls. So that whole week, I didn't really get a chance to enjoy the Super Bowl per se. I was just running after Peyton Manning stories. But no, I was saying my favorite Super Bowl was when John Elway, the helicopter.
Yeah, against the Packers.
Against the Packers. And this one's for John. That was spine-tingling stuff.
Because he had lost three before.
Badly.
Yeah, none of them were close.
None of them were close.
And none was more shocking than the Washington blowout, I think.
Yeah. We all knew that San Francisco would kill him.
The game against the Giants played since 22 game. For 25 or so.
But that game against Packers were a heavy favorite, and Broncos put it to them.
We usually end the podcast, all of our podcasts, with the 5 questions, which we will ask you. But we have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask you a series of other rapid-fire questions as well.
I'll try to have a rapid-fire answer.
Favorite sports book?
Either Ball 4 or Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam about, and let me put one more in there, the Bob Knight book, Seeds on the Brain.
For some reason, I have no idea why I had a feeling your first answer was going to be Ball 4. Favorite sports movie? That's not hockey.
Oh, because I was going to say Slapshot, man.
Toe Blake,
old-time hockey. Put on the foil.
I know another movie that you and I talk about all the time, or when I see you. Underrated. North Dallas 40.
North Dallas 40 was phenomenal. Oh, you know what? I'm in Indiana. I love Hoosiers. I just do. It's just such a great feel-good movie. And over the years, I've gotten a chance to know the writers and the Ann Spa and the other gentleman whose name escapes me. But yeah, Hoosiers.
When was the first time you attended the Indianapolis 500, and what did you think of it after?
All right. So when I was in college, we got in a big old van, and we went in the infield, and I didn't see 1 second of the race. We just partied. So I can't say that I honestly saw the race.
Mark Miles, are you listening?
The first time I actually attended and saw and was conscious would be 2000 when I got here.
And what was your reaction?
I thought it was the coolest damn thing I'd ever seen. And I'm not a motorsports hardcore. I think it's one of those sports, much like hockey, it's got to be in your blood. And motorsports, growing up in New York, I mean, to us, motorsports is, riding in a yellow cab on Fifth Avenue, right? So I thought it was incredibly cool, but I didn't understand it very well. I think I understand the sport a lot better now after 20-something years.
Favorite Indy sports moment? Would you say it's the Super Bowl win?
No. And if you talk to any player who played on that team, they'll tell you the greatest moment was beating New England the week before. Beating New England, it was almost an anticlimax. They knew they'd beat the Bears. Who was their quarterback again?
Eddie White?
No, the quarterback for the Bears.
Good, he went to IU, didn't he?
The kid from Bloomington. Goodman,
Yeah.
not Goodman.
I'll think of it anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, that was an anticlimax. Beating the New England Patriots, the big bad Patriots. That was an exorcism. It was a civic exorcism, is what that was.
Favorite sports interview? Favorite person to interview?
Peyton's right up there. I'm a big hockey guy, so I always had a great relationship with Patrick Waugh.
Oh, yeah, the goalie.
Yeah, I was a goaltender. I'd say those guys. I remember David Harrison used to play for the Pacers. One of my favorite guys. Quirky, weird, screwed up. But I like weird. Anthony Gonzalez is another guy I really like. So a lot of good interviews over the years.
Now I'm going to make a statement, and you tell me how wrong I am.
Okay.
The Pacers were justified in going into the stands for the brawl.
No, you can't do it. You just can't do it. You just can't do it.
They were completely justified.
Oh, no.
Here are the actual 5 questions. You ready?
Okay.
What was your first job?
My first job was at the Bergen County Record in Bergen County, New Jersey. A very good paper in the Meadowlands.
What was your first concert?
First concert was Jethro Tull at Shea Stadium I would have been in high school, around 75.
Yeah, you're like your contemporary or past teammate, the absolutely adorable Mark Allen, who grew up. He's the best.
He's a great
But he saw
dude.
all those great New York City concerts.
Yeah. The Wall. Oh, my gosh.
Number 3, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
Sophie's Choice by William Styron.
Number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
A sports event or just an event?
Any event. I'm going to ask you about a sport event here. That's going to be my final question.
Okay.
So any other event?
The civil rights marches.
Like the March on Washington that ended with the I Have a Dream speech, perhaps?
Yeah.
Number 5, if you could have dinner with anyone living today.
Living today.
Wasn't it Grossman? Rex Grossman.
Yeah.
Quarterback for the Bears.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose?
Probably Peyton. We've had beers before, but we've never really gotten down to brass tacks about life and relationships and fatherhood and all that stuff. I think 2 hours, I like to go just play golf and drink beer with Peyton. I say that we already have a great relationship, but I think he'd be fascinating, especially now that he's retired and he doesn't have to watch everything he says.
Right. Okay, so the 6th question of the 5 questions.
You told me there would be 5.
And journalists only ask the questions they want to ask, right? Like you stick to the number that you say.
Exactly.
If you could have not covered, but witnessed and enjoyed any sporting event in history, which one would you choose? I will tell you, Eric Holcomb, I asked him that question, Governor Holcomb, and he said the Thrilla in Manila. And then he asked me the question because we were just chatting and for an interview I did for him. And I said, the Miracle on Ice.
I think the Miracle on Ice. That was going to be, I'm glad you jogged my memory, but I'll never forget. I was in Detroit during the Miracle on Ice, 1980, right?
February 22nd.
Yeah.
Washington's birthday.
And I was staying at this no-tell motel in the worst part of Detroit because I was working for the Indiana Daily Student covering the Big Ten track and field finals at Cobo Arena. And there was a guy from the Boston Globe named Joe Concannon.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember him. He asked me if I wanted to come over to, I think it's called the Fontainebleau or some hotel like that to watch the hockey game. We had no idea what happened.
Because the game had already been played.
The game had already been played. Nobody knew who won the game. It was crazy. And me and Joe got ourselves a 12-pack of beer and God knows what else. And we sat and I fell asleep on the floor of his hotel.
I had 2 great quotes about that. One was Jim McKay, the legendary ABC sports anchor. His daughter was at the game. And he asked her, how was it? Now, this is 1980. And she said, the last time I saw that many American flags, they were burning them.
Yeah.
And the other quote was, I read an article recently about that game, and it said, just imagine a Canadian college football team beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, you don't have any idea the magnitude of this upset.
No, it's the greatest upset that I can remember in sports history because people forget that they played at Madison Square Garden, the Russians.
Like 10-3.
10-3.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't even been that close. I remember watching that game, and they were just skating circles around the American kids. It was just a moment in history.
Have you seen the 30 for 30 that's about the Miracle on Ice from the Soviet point of view? It is terrific.
I know, and it's my idea.
Get out.
I went to ESPN with the idea, and no
money,
no nothing. They just did it. Now, do I know for a fact that they took my idea? I don't know. All I know is I reached out to Bill Simmons about doing a 30 for 30 on it, and was told it was not something there. I wanted to do one on the brawl too, the Pacers Pistons brawl, which Jermaine O'Neal did a couple of years, about a year ago, 2 years ago. But yeah, it's another great idea that I got nothing for.
Can we have you back on and we can talk about the sports media business?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, man.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. You have been very generous. I love all your answers. It was worth the wait. How about I just say that?
Oh, I appreciate it.
I had a blast.
I'm neither a leader nor a legend, but I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.